We are live.
What? Oh, so they don't. Hey, just a second.
Thank you. Yeah. That all actually is, it's good, they can pick up us.
Soon as I do that.
Not being multiple content.
Thank you.
Space. It's great.
It's a little bad.
I saw you still got your badge? Yeah. Is he coming? I just saw the ones in the day. Oh, yeah, it's, yeah, sure. That's how we'll review it. We go and get started. Sorry about that. You're gonna have to project if you talk. It's the owl's right there. It picks up everything, including that. So the live stream is probably not the best. Apologies. I don't know if anybody has any kind of authority to go tell them this now. I don't think so. Are we sure? Well, welcome. Let me gavel that, I guess. Welcome to the second meeting of the BRL Commission. Third, actually. First, yeah. This one will be focused on an issue that's really important to all of us, I think, and something that we know is a real challenge for a lot of folks, and that is the mental health of individuals with intellectual disabilities. We have an expert lineup of presenters here, and sorry you're gonna have to yell. We asked for mics, we didn't get them, so there's something to make do. If you want to walk around, that's fine too. I think you're. So before we get started, I just wanted to. We have a little bit of business to take care of, and then we'll jump right into our presentation. So, commission members, everybody get a chance to review the minutes that were sent out. Are there any comments on the minutes? All right, can I get a motion to approve? So moved, Kelly. Second?
Second.
All in favor? Motion passes. Before we get started, I don't believe Senator Hunley or Representative Ledbetter were able to make it to the last meeting because of my fault. So I would like to give them an opportunity to maybe introduce yourself and just explain, kind of your interest in this area.
Sure, it's great to be with you all. Thanks so much. I'm Andrea Hunley. I'm the state senator for District 46, which is the downtown near west sides of Indianapolis. And I'm really interested in this. My background is in education. I was a school principal for a decade and a teacher before that. So the intersection of education and behavioral concerns, of course, the Venn diagram overlaps greatly. And so I'm just glad to be here. Thanks.
Thank you.
Good morning again. Thank you. Cindy Ledbetter. I represent House District 75, which is in southern Indiana. It's portions of Warwick, Gibson, and Pike counties. My interest was in this the speaker placed me here, but he placed me here because I'm a psychiatric mental health nurse practitioner. So I actually do medication management for those who have behavioral health disorders. So I'm really excited to be here and hope we can move things forward in our state. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you. And then if we just go around really quickly, just introduce yourself.
I'm Rachel Yoder, I'm a child psychiatrist at Indiana University. I'm Kelly Streeter, I'm president of the Indiana County Commissioners.
Good afternoon, David Reed, Deputy Director of Services for DCS.
Zoe Frams, President and CEO of the Indiana Council of Community Mental Health Centers.
Jason Thompson with AARP Indiana.
Michelle Clark, I'm the Director of Students for Family Engagement at the Department of Education.
I'm Mike Ryder, I represent Senate 20.
All right, well, welcome officially, and thank you to all our guests who have introduced themselves. Before we jump in, I just take a little background about me. When I was a lawyer at Legal Services, I actually sued the state a couple times, and it was about this very issue, the intersection of services for people with behavioral health disorders and intellectual disabilities. It was the right thing to do at the time. I had no regrets. I won for the record. Now that I've come over to the state, dark side, I recognize that it is a lot more, right? That there these are systems problems, and the problems really start at the federal level. There are some really difficult provisions within the kind of federal regulatory apparatus of this particular issue that make it really hard for us at the state level to treat people like we do. Right, as opposed to individual diagnoses. And so I just wanted to frame that to make sure that we understand that we're here to see what the state of Indiana can do. And there's things we can do. You'll hear about suggestions and ideas from folks about ways to make things better. But there is this kind of dark cloud of the federal government that until there's changes made at that level, what we can do is limited. That said, this is too important of an issue to ignore. And so I'm glad we're having this meeting to do this. The only second point I'll make is the conversation around this topic has been one, I think, historically and recently of you just need to do better, right? Whether it's talking to provider, talking to on either side or talking to anybody. And I just want to caution us that telling people they just need to do better is not a constructive solution, in my opinion. I think that there are real systemic and structural issues that we need to address. And all of the providers that I've met on both sides of this are so dedicated and committed and really care and want to do better. And it's our job to figure out ways to kind of clear the path out. So that's the framework and overview as we hear from our presenters. And I hope feel free to ask lots of questions and make sure you yell because this room is terrible. And there's construction outside. And for people watching online, if you're having trouble hearing, I apologize. There will be a recording of this. Simply, maybe we can fix the sound, fix it in post, as they say. That's the thing for us. So with that, we'll get started. And I believe Dr. Willis first. And go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, sure. I'm gonna stand over here so I can actually see the slides, just to My name is Jim Mills. I'm a native New Jersey born in Bloomington, live in Bloomington, and this is my 30th year working with people in intellectual development disabilities. Started in Bloomington, Cincinnati. Loved it. Went to graduate school up the street at Ohio State University. It's a specialty dual diagnosis program, and I spent most of the last 20 years in Indiana. Mostly in leadership roles in administrative or clinical roles, also working with this population. I currently serve on the board of directors for the National Association for Truly Diagnosed, as well as in our and then locally in Dallas connection. So this is very close to my heart. What I'm going to try to do is give you a little bit of an overview. My father was a history professor at IU. Sometimes I get a little bit to history, but I think it's good to understand where we are to kind of get an idea of where we've been. So if you look at this next slide. So way back, let's say 150 to 500 years ago, nobody really differentiated between intellectual disability and just simple mental health. So if you had schizophrenia or if you had Down syndrome, you were crazy or some variation of that. And I really do think words matter. I'll mention that a few times. But if you look here, this is kind of the first that people could look at in 1840. The Census Bureau looked at idiocy and insanity. So you see they're kind of put together. There really was no distinction. In 1917, the United States started to look at statistics across mental health. And that's really where we got the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Area. So people started taking statistics. Next slide. So then World War II happened. And there were a whole bunch of people who got what at the time people referred to as shell shock. And so there needed to be a little bit more cohesive strategy of diagnosis. And so at that point, the Army, the VA started to look at diagnosis at 1943. And then shortly after that, the World Health Organization published IDC 6. I think now we're at 13 or something like that. And the IDC basically categorizes by number, but it's not like the DSM that gives you diagnostic criteria and says, 3 of 5 on 5 have to be met over a certain period of time. So what I'm really trying to get at here is we're just starting to see diagnosis. Next slide, please. And in 1952, notice it's not called DSM-1 because at the time there was no DSM-2 or anything, so it's just DSM. And at this point, the diagnostic classification included mental deficiency as the diagnosis, and it was primarily based on IQ. One of the things that's really interesting to look through the book is that they took pains to say we're no longer going to use the terms idiot, imbecile, and moron to differentiate between these. So you see what I mean when I say the words matter? People now get very upset about the term mental retardation for very justifiable reasons. But our diagnostic criteria have included horrible words for many years. Just one, right before I started graduate school, I worked at a state institution in Columbus, Ohio, and it's called Columbus Development Center. And I remember from my orientation as a brand new ESP that they showed a picture of what used to be the sign. Now the sign says Columbus Development Center. That's kind of accepted. See that. Originally, it was called the Columbus Center for Imbecility and Idiology. Just imagine your doctor says, "Hey, you probably aren't going to be able to take care of your kid. Why don't you drop them off at the center next to science?" So in any case, that's where we were in the 1950s. I will also say that at this point, the term autism only appeared as a diagnostic criterion for schizophrenia. And as a result, that the guy, I think it was 1918 or 1970, the guy's name was William Boyle. He was a Swiss psychiatrist. He coined the term schizophrenia. He also talked about autistic thinking. And this is the reason that later people started to look at autism. They thought, maybe it's just childhood schizophrenia. We now know that that really is no relationship with the too, but that was in DSM three, where they actually even said, maybe it's got child innocence. So next slide, please. All right, so this is 68, 80, 94. So in 68, the decision was made, let's replace mental deficiency with mental retardation. There still was no autism diagnosis. DSM three maintained mental retardation as a diagnosis. It still contained mostly IQ diagnoses for that. And of course, dual diagnosis is mental illness and intellectual disability combined. So I'm kind of talking about the diagnosis of intellectual disability at the time. DSM three is also the first time that autism was started to be diagnosed, and it was called infantile autism. One of the diagnostic criteria for that was, I'm just going to paraphrase it, not perfect, but if language was present at all, it's very, very limited, blah, blah, blah. So if you think about what is infantile as the beginning of that diagnosis mean to you, it means it's little kids, right? And then when you look at the language, it means little kids with probably severe to profound intellectual disability. So I say that for a very specific reason, which is in DSM 4, 1994, it's Asperger's guide. So think about that time frame, 1994, all of a sudden, instead of like, if you think of the bell-shaped curve, and right here, this tiny little bit, just a percentage or two of the curve, might be you're eligible for infantile autism, and now Asperger's, you add a little curve. So I would simply say that's probably the main reason that we see such an explosion in diagnosis, is because so many more people are eligible for diagnosis, right? In 1992, if you were a kid with normal IQ who had all these symptoms or displayed all of the characteristics of autism, you wouldn't get diagnosed as it's not infantile autism, right? So 1994, you might get Asperger's. Fast forward to DSM-5, and now it's just autism spectrum disorder, and includes the full spectrum, including full autism. So I mentioned DSM-5. That also is when, and this really follows the American Association on Intellectual Development and Disability, which for many years was AAMR, before that was AAMP. Words matter. AAMR decided in, I think it was 2004, to change intellectual disability. Then the DSM, American Psychiatric Association, followed suit the next subsequent DSM. So this is when literally people like me got to stop diagnosing people with mental retardation. And then people would get this, and I was like, I'm sorry, that's the diagnosis. I'm grateful that I don't have to do that anymore. Because words do matter. People get this, and there are good reasons because they get stigmatized. And the reason I put this DMID is in 2007, the National Association for the Dually Diagnosed published a companion manual that essentially said, people with intellectual disability experience the full range of mental, including mental illness, other problems. Sometimes it looks different. And here's how you can find it. So if you have a little bit of trouble, here's some ways that you can diagnose that. And I'm not going to go into all the differences, but it's, if you're familiar with the DSM-5, the DMID, now it's the DMID2, and I don't remember the exact publication, etc. That gives you a lot of insight into, okay, this person has intellectual disability. How do I also diagnose depression if this person can't speak? Or this person has limited, or this person's language is acquiescent, where they mostly just say that they think I want. And in some cases, people with mild intellectual disability, it's very clear. They can come in and say, I feel terrible, I'm suicidal, just similar things that any clinician can do. But the DMI, we really made it more available to the average clinician to be able to make these co-diagnoses. Next slide. So again, I realize, I hope I'm not boring if you're doing this, but I kind of thought put it on the time. So prior to 1980, and 1980 is an important period, that's when DSM-3 came out. Frankly, if DSM-3 hadn't come out, nobody here will ever heard of DSM because the previous versions weren't very good. Weren't very good to see. But DSM 3 actually did a good job of trials to make sure that it was empirically accurate. And it also divided up the diagnoses in a way, somebody in California, Indiana, Ohio, basically made the same types of diagnoses. But prior to that, people looked at folks with intellectual disability and said they lack insight. It can't happen. It can't happen. They don't know problems. They don't even know what they're talking about. Quite literally, that was the state of things prior to 1980. There were a group of clinicians, and they actually came together in 1982, I'm sorry, 1983, they formed the National Association for the Dually Diagnosed. But prior to that, Frank Smith, who's a psychiatrist in Nebraska, had coined the term dual diagnosis because he was working with a large number of these folks. And he was saying, hey, these folks have just as many mental health issues as anybody else. This whole notion of you can't have it is gone. I'm using my words not theirs. And then possibly the most important piece of the puzzle at this point was in 1982, Stephen Reese, who at the time was at the University of Illinois Chicago. He actually then went to Ohio State University. I studied. He coined the term diagnostic overshadowing. And what that basically, and it wasn't just he wrote a book that said diagnostic overshadowing. He did a study and he collected data and he found that clinicians very, very overwhelmingly were assigning mental health characteristics to the intellectual disability. If you had somebody without an intellectual disability, the mental health diagnosis flowed. If you had a person who had an intellectual disability, it didn't matter whether that person seemed to have ADHD, it's part of the intellectual disability. If they had depression, it's because they had intellectual disability. But if they had schizophrenia, well, this must be a manifestation of this person's disability. They have this disability. So, in other words, the dual diagnosis is overshadowed by the intellectual disability. If you fast forward, then later in the 80s and 90s, you had a bunch of screening instruments that were developed. Those really showed people that there were mental health issues according to people with intellectual disabilities. And then I mentioned in 2007, the DMI with the companion to DSM. Next slide. So this is a big domain. You want to think about dual diagnosis. If you're a person with an intellectual disability, that doesn't give you some great immunity to other issues. It doesn't mean that you're going to be less likely to have depression or schizophrenia. It's kind of like, I use this example with caution because I don't want to make it sound like every diagnosis is catastrophic. But if you have heart disease, that doesn't immunize you from cancer. You might have both of these diagnoses. Similarly, if you have an intellectual disability, you might be just as susceptible to schizophrenia because we all know that schizophrenia is very, very highly hereditary. So just because you have an intellectual disability doesn't mean that all of a sudden you've got some shield against schizophrenia or any other mental health. In fact, most people recognize now it's not that they're immune or that they lack insight, but that people with intellectual disability actually have mental health diagnoses on a much higher scale. National Core Indicators is sort of a national clearinghouse for data. You can go on the website and this ran this the other day. They had an aim of 12,000 people, and about 50% of people with intellectual disability have program. I ran the same thing for Indiana. So it's about 50%, which is probably 2.5 times as much, maybe 3 times as much as the normal population. When people ask me, why do people with intellectual disability have a high occurrence of program? Well, part of it is it's really hard to have this. There may be other reasons too, like there might be some prenatal insult, sort of the same reason that people with intellectual disability often have seizure disorder, much higher incidence of seizure disorder. Maybe there's something to do with that, but just the buffering effects of having great friends, being married, having a meaningful activities in your life. A lot of people with disabilities And so they are more susceptible because they don't have the buffers that prevent many of us from developing those mental health conditions. So, you know, one of the, I think probably the best message is people with intellectual developmental disabilities, if they have a co-occurring mental health diagnosis, they benefit from treatment. I think my last slide actually says something about, yeah, so just to kind of give you a basic example, I realize some of you all are actually nurse practitioners, psychiatrists and stuff, so this is all not new, not really here. If you think about people without disability, what are your mental health needs? Well, psychotherapy of some sort. There are lots of different opportunities, different kinds of group therapies, different types of therapy, and then sometimes psychotherapeutic medication. If you look at mental health treatment for those with dual diagnosis, there's a third component, and then also psychiatry is probably being gone through better. And I don't mean to take away from psychiatry, probably is being gone through better. People with limited cognitive and communication skills sometimes really can't participate in psychotherapy. There definitely are a lot of people who benefit, but it's a smaller portion than that. Often psychiatric medication. According to the NCI, about 50% of people with intellectual disability currently have some psychiatric medication. When I say psychiatric, I'm talking about, you know, antipsychotic, anti-anxiety, antidepressant, those would be the three main ones. But any you know, psychiatric. And then there's also behavior support. And my friend Kelly Parkman is going to probably talk about this. But truly, you know, and I actually have at my agency that does behavior support. And what this really is, it's master's level clinicians who go to your home, go to your workplace, go to your day program, and meet you. It's not come to my office and sit on the couch and we talk about it and say next week. It's I'm going to go participate in your meeting, and it's wonderful. I'm not saying it's all perfect, but it is a great support that helps people, and that behavior clinician can really be a linchpin for mental health treatment for people with intellectual disability, because those people go to the meetings. They should be holding psychiatry, and then they should be able to go back to the team and report what's going on, and then also demystify that this is what an antipsychotic drug is. This is why it's helpful. These are some things to look at. That's why behavior support is so useful. And also working regularly with clients, training caregivers, staff, everything else. And I'm sorry, I'm taking you.
No, I just had to write down what I was supposed to be talking about. Thank you.
I have some. I appreciate your time. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions? I think that's behind slide. Oh, I just have a yeah, so that's it. Dual diagnosis is intellectual disability, co-occurring mental health concerns. I think it's really important that people understand the words matter. They always matter. You know, now we may not use words like retardation, but a lot of people still say, "Oh, you know what? Not too long ago, that was just as stigmatizing for people with disabilities." Mental health disorders do exist in people with intellectual disability, and it's usually the higher. And then don't forget diagnostic overshot. I think any clinician is a little bit susceptible to it. Some clinicians just put blinders on and say it's all disability. I don't think that's common, but I do think that a lot of times, you know, and this the last thing I'll say is this: I have helped admit people to these acute care centers, and sometimes the admitting to your social worker or psychiatrist and say, "Oh, this isn't psychiatric. This is behavioral." And I would submit to them that's a distinction out of the real difference. And that our acute care centers should be freely admitted with intellectual disability when they need those practitioners. So now, so, does anybody have any questions? All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, so we heard from, this is just really thorough, and I think a really useful overview of like the history and kind of where we are and why we are. I think this distinction about like behavior and psychiatric is one that we've been, I think, trying to move away from. It's, that it's really entrenched, I think, in the field, and so thank you for shedding some light on that. Next up, I believe we have my colleague Kelly Mitchell, who runs the Bureau of Disability Services, Holly presented, so, yeah. All good, yeah. Holly, even better, yeah. So Holly, you can stay wherever you want to. And
I have to change the direction of the chairs. I'll go up here and see if my voice carries. Like yours carried pretty well here, so I'm gonna stand here. Before we come on with that, I'm the director of the Bureau of Disability Services. Shout out today, for 5 minutes here today. I'm not gonna do a lot of complaining, but I will share that I'm not going to become a long chair. About 34 years, I worked with people, different abilities and skills, but 20 years actually with the Bureau, in various positions. So, I will try not to be too passionate today, about supporting people and their faith. But, today I'm here to talk a little bit, just give an overview of Bureau of Disability Services, talk a little bit very briefly about our eligibility, an overview of our services and supports, a little talk about something called labor transition, and then just some brief conversation about some ongoing initiatives within the Bureau and the Division of Disability and Rehabilitation Services, which is where the Bureau of Disability Services is passed. So we can talk about the Bureau of Disability Services, I'll talk about a vision at the Bureau of Disability Services, our vision is that all people access to opportunities to their lives and their life. Our mission is actually to connect people with disabilities together and to the resources and support them. Now, I believe the values you can see that, but inclusion is huge for us and for the people we support. Next slide, please. Oh, yellow is a little too bit. I apologize for that. This is our division of disability and rehabilitative services. It really is about all people who have the right and should be empowered to live a life or learn by their community. Again, I mentioned inclusion is huge for us. That we guidance what we do and decisions that we make and support people. Next slide, please. So the Bureau of Disability Services is pretty fortunate to have field offices. We have 8 offices in Indiana in various locations. You see here that's very small. It is on our website. But those offices are filled with staff that are the front door to these services. They also provide support to individuals and families and the teams that support those individuals. And monitor the services and supports that are provided through the teams providers. We'll talk a little bit about the services. One thing that I should mention, we used to call Bureau of Developmental Disability Services, as you've been idea, or needs people serve policy. But we dropped the developmental from one of the agency's name to Bureau of Disability Services for a few reasons, or a couple of reasons. One we'll talk about in a little bit, because in July we'll be supporting individuals with different abilities and skills, and a person will not necessarily have to have an intellectual and developmental disability be supported by us. And I will explain that is a little bit. The other thing is it's really more reflective of what we do. Well, right now, everyone we support has a goal toward development of disability or condition. We support a lot of people with low diagnosis as well. Next slide, please. So this is our eligibility for services today, and that is intellectual or developmental disability or condition with an onset before the age of 22. The goal will continue indefinitely, and then substantial functional limitations in these areas. And then these to you that I want to clarify the distinction. Those substantial functional limitations are required for what's considered intermediate care facility for individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, level of care. That's the eligibility that is required for them. foods programs. And Medicaid funds the vast majority of these services. And we did mention here just about Medicaid, that individuals receiving services do not be Medicaid eligible and eligible for Medicaid under certain categories. Those would be about age 100 disabled factors. Next slide, please. So, these have a number of different services and supports. Our home community-based services for many labor services, which is what individuals and families and a lot of our stakeholders call home community-based services. We currently administer the animal support labor and the community integration and implementation labor. These are some of the supports available through these labors. And I'm going to get their bigger support services. This is not an all-inclusive list of services available through our home community-based service array. But these are some of the services. But wanted to highlight some of these. The only required service on home community-based services is a case manager. And that case manager is a key to individuals and families being able to access those services. Individuals receiving home community-based services have the right to choose what services they want and who provides them within these and Medicaid providers. Choice is huge with home community-based services. There is something called, and I won't go into great detail, but there's something called settings rule from our partners and centers for those services. And that settings rule is a federal agreement, and it says that home community-based services need to provide opportunities to ensure that individuals can live in their community and access those needed services and supports. And we included, and it emphasizes the fact that with disabilities have the right, the same rights as they will not receive home-based services. Access, inclusion, privacy, all those things. Next slide, please. Our family support labor, we have about 23,000 people that we support through the family support labor today. It is a package labor. There is a waiting list for that labor. That waiting list, people come off of that waiting list every month. Or they could access that labor through what's called priority categories. So we have the ability for an individual who is separating from school and is between the ages of 18 and 24 years. They don't have to wait on that wait list for services to be finished. They can go straight onto that labor. If the only eligible. The other priority category that I want to get to is that if an individual is a child of an active or a member of the U.S. military or U.S. Armed Forces, or actually are of that child of that of the U.S. Armed Forces for national guard. They do not need to say they will be rolled into those services and that. Next slide, please. The community integration with the rotational labor is our comprehensive labor. So it supports about 90,000 people. There is a wait list for this waiver because this waiver is needs-based. So it is, people have to meet the eligibility requirement that I mentioned earlier. They have to have Medicaid, tax at this waiver, and they have to meet these, like one of these criteria. That might be and I'm looking at Austin, a youth aging out of DCS services and support to the with aging out of the residential placement through DCS, aging out of the DOE placement, again, home based services as well, providing opportunities for people who live in their community. If an individual living in a family home or in a community and is a caregiver, that can qualify them. Individuals whose primary caregivers 80 years of age or older. They could also potentially qualify for this, when they're vetted to the use of when they're current setting. And then lastly, the last thing I believe is that there are health and safety risks as determined by their provision directive. So those are that's the rule that comes in the CI page. People must meet those, one of those criteria in order to access that CI. That's the other kind of array of services that we have is really more of a facility-based services. They are considered institutions, but they are small, supervised living settings located in communities, roughly anywhere from 4 to 8 bed facilities. You often will hear the term group home, but I will say that group homes are really large. The medical center tends to do that, looks very different. The supervised living homes that needs supports. They are licensed by means and certified by the Indiana Department of Health. So they are very different, pretty structured compared to the community-based services. The facility-based or institutional services like supervised living and the home community-based services are mutually exclusive. So a person can access both at the same time, but they can move from one to the other. If that makes sense. Next slide. The supervised living has a premium rate that is given to the provider that operates the home. And this is just a quick list of what the premium includes. With the waiver services, I mentioned that individuals with community services choose what services they want and we provide them. That waiver funding that they have belongs to them to use to purchase services, and we provide them. With the group home, that money goes straight to that provider for that person in that facility, if that makes sense. If you think about that, as opposed to keeping them giving next to the next. Next slide. These have some other specialty settings. One is extensive support needs home, or ESN, and that is a supervised living setting. They are 4-bed homes. We have 22 in the state, and these support adults who have extensive behavioral needs. Many of the individuals in these settings also have a diagnosis. It has a higher staffing ratio in terms of the direct support professionals that work at home. There's 3 staff for 4 individuals. They're waiting their hours essentially, and then 2 staff. There is a we also have another specialty group home, it says in medical needs, again, 4-bed homes for people with extensive medical needs. And then we have a CRM. I don't know, but it's the acronym is for Comprehensive Rehabilitation Management Needs Facility. So AID has one of these in the state of Indiana. It is been operated by our company. It is a 20-bed facility. It is for individuals who have very expensive needs and can generally or probably someone in less than stable settings. The CRM is a secure setting. Now, when I say secure, that means that individuals need to be staffed with them perhaps to walk out the door, but they are not locked in the sense that the individuals have to stay there. So these services are all we don't, and these people can be committed to our services. So it all. Now, when I say that, that doesn't mean that if John's in the CRM and he decides I'm going to leave, that we say, okay. Obviously there's a support team around that person, which for that person about why this is a good place for them right now. It is not a permanent setting for people. It is meant to be a stop in their life, a season in their life, and be there for them to be better. Help them transition from life and service sex. The same with the ESR. That is not meant to be a long placement. That is meant to be a place where individuals can get some very extensive support from a behavioral perspective. So that they can then transition to something that's restricted. Next slide, please. Okay. So in July of this year, which is 81 days away, the Bureau of Disability Services, or actually Indiana, will launch the Indiana Pathways for Aging, which is a managed healthcare services and support program for individuals 60 and up. Individuals that are currently served through the Age and Disabled Waiver, which is currently administered through the Division of Aging. Individuals on that waiver that are 60 and up will move to the Indiana Pathways for Aging. Individuals 59 and under on the Age and Disabled Waiver, and everyone that's traumatic brain injury waiver that is currently using the services administering as well. We will transition to these, and we will have administrative responsibilities and operational responsibilities for the what will be renamed the health and wellness rate and the traumatic brain injury. The health and wellness rate we anticipate we will have about 13,000 people. 59 and under being served through that and will transition to the health and wellness rate on July 1st. And February is roughly around this. So there is next slide. So this is the future of FSSA community-based services programs, with the exception that DMHA also has community-based services that are not a part of this chart that you see or a part of this waiver transition. This is solely about those programs, those community-based services that the Division of Disability and Services and the school community assuming responsibility for July 1st, and then the pathways for aging further that are in the responsibility. The division will continue to be post. Next slide. One important thing to note about that transition on July 1st, it is anyone makes is that we have been very intentional, FSSA has been very intentional, that we try to make it a very smooth transition for individuals and their providers. So we just included some information here, the eligibility process for the health and wellness waiver and the traumatic brain injury waiver is not changing on July 1st. It is remaining as it is today. The services are remaining as they are today. The IT system for the same provider qualifications. And again, that's an effort to make sure that those individuals that is smooth, a smooth transition for them and for the providers. Next slide. Lastly, and we can watch because I think everyone over our ongoing initiatives. So we have a number of ongoing initiatives that I just wanted to mention that probably the relevant to today is something called the National Capital Institute, or the NCPI. So the Division is building rehabilitative services that are participating in the NCPI. More of the two, and that is a group of experts here. One spent a lot of time involved with some national experts giving us information about diagnosis. It's really focused on individuals with IDP and mental health diagnoses. And we invited in year one, we had some of our friends from community health centers, our friends from some of the feeds providers, the Department of Health, Department of Health Services, all our state partners, as well as our community partners. that participated in that this year. And that was really a lot of really good information. We went through an assessment, a self-assessment about where those gaps are in Indiana. And how can we approach those gaps to better support individuals, and their families. So we are now in two, and there are efforts to have some training for some others on the diagnosis. And help us to support people, and their families when they are in services and, how we're gonna, approach those gaps that we all know exist that during kind of alluded to. We also have used some of our way because we've enough funds for raising pilot projects. And we have a number of community partners that are engaging their pilots on how to address the bigger support needs of individuals, women with as well. The third item listed here is our systems transformation and competitive and great employment. Have to note that we, as a division, feel a responsibility to ensure that every individual has the opportunity to engage in competitive and great employment. And how we can help them build community connections so that they can do that. And that's regardless of disability. We are using a lot of those vision projects and helping all us find ways that we can better support people that are in this. Our institutional modernization, I mentioned our supervised living homes. We are in the middle of, right at the beginning stages of a institutional modernization, which is going to be a multi-year effort to modernize those institutional type services we currently offer. We have about 3,000 roughly people in supervised living right now. And we have other people that want to access that, but our model needs to change a little bit. And it needs to be a little more responsive to individuals where those more complex needs, and individuals with their dual diagnosis. So we are working with our community partners on ways that we can modernize that system as well. And then lastly, our neighborhood design and facade, we are also please that's been for a few years now, engaging with stakeholders about what in terms of our home services, where are those gaps, what is it that's working, what's not working, what we need to change. And we learn that information really from interacting with the people receiving supports, and the families who are either receiving services and support or getting those services. So next slide. That's really nice.
Questions from?
I have so many, but okay, so my first question is, you mentioned the wait list, which I know that's been a historical thing where that wait list has been long. What options, what is available for those who are on the wait list in the meantime?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So our wait list, and you mentioned historically, so I just want to make sure our wait list has been around for a few years. Okay, all right, just want to make sure we don't think we don't know that. So our district offices with individuals and families, and this kind of goes back to that mission of connecting people, because we know that everyone who comes to our door may not be eligible, but so may have to wait. So we work with individuals and families that provide other resources to address those needs. That may be other state agencies, that may be just basic community resources.
But there's not a payer for those basic community resources as they're on a wait list.
No,
Right?
these would be, so, yeah,
Right.
there's not, but the idea is, or part of this is helping individuals and families know what exists already in their community and accessing that. Right, whether they have a disability or not, You know, there's a lot of resources out there, and it's probably helping out individuals and families to that as well.
Maybe a clarifying point. Yeah.
I put it, I'm sorry.
Never said anything.
Probably. Posted on the wait list, they're making it pay for for instance, if they're. Single age, they would be entitlement services to as well. If they're Medicaid eligible, there would be traditional Medicaid plans. We have state plans, early periodic screening, diagnostic testing. So there are other options, that are available, and I will say our current family support for the wait list is predominantly children and children 5 and under. So for that group, 3 and under, they're also eligible for first step services if they're experiencing a developmental delay. And there's a cooperative services that are available to do that. So I'm sorry. No, I don't think that we're going to be thinking another thing. Yes, and I think we're going to be
I'd like to say really quickly too, because you brought up ICT grants, there are a couple of ICT innovation grants that are currently being funded as pilot projects that are addressing the needs of people on the wait list that may in the future, based on your redesign, may in the future offer some support that they're not going to get. Perfect.
Any non-Zoe questions? Let me go back to Zoe.
No. Just curious, when the last time we looked at the amount of the waiver to cap at 26, about 20,000.
That was just increased, in 2023.
And then I have one more quick question. Under the supervised group living, I noticed that there was behavior management services. Are those clinical services? What kind of services are those?
So the behavior support services through the home community-based services, the way services are, yes, there is a clinician, it's actually 2 levels. There's a clinician and there's a HSP.
At all the locations.
So the home community-based, so the supervised group living is, those supports are provided by that provider that knows and operates that group. So they may access a behavior clinician, or they may not. They may utilize current staff to provide some of that behavior support. There is some discretion with that provider. On the community-based services side, in the Medicaid waiver side, we've got a requirement that the individuals be on the behavior clinician.
So because it's variable, the training could also be different.
Yeah, I mean, for the home community-based services. We have provider requirements and training requirements, so I don't think there would be a whole lot of variation with those services for that.
But it does depend on who the workers are, right?
They all have to meet the provider requirements. And those are spelled out with the supervised group living, those are spelled out in the survey process. And the program.
Thank you.
Mentioned that better than did.
Yeah, my concern is about the dual diagnosis. Are you seeing areas, as it relates to bureaucracy that prevent you and maybe Katie being able to work together for these individuals that need the behavioral support, but also would benefit from the community mental health services? I've seen in my practice where those buckets don't meet. And you've got people that have intellectual disability that really would benefit from community mental health, but because of the division between the Department of Mental Health and BEAS, there's a problem there. And when you said earlier about the word you said, the institutional modernization, that's very important to me as part of this discussion. Can you talk about that?
Sure, the institutional modernization is an issue, so it's really looking at the BEAS facilities right now. And how we can modernize those supervised living settings to better support the needs of people today. We've had a lot of changes in those settings for a number of years, so again, revisiting that. We're getting a lot more younger people seeking, those services that we have. As far as the individuals, accessing services, I will say that DNHA and we actually work together. I think we both recognize the, difficulties, in supporting individuals with dual diagnosis. And I think part of Jay's invite here was so that we can kind of talk about how we can better address that. But it is something that we work with DMHA and we work with people about, maybe not going to do, you know, what do we need to change?
And I would sort of elaborate from a systems level. Like the main barrier that I see is federal.
Yeah.
Right there is I mean, it's, I don't think it was designed this way, but there's the way the federal code around this is written, it says. Those functional limitations cannot come from mental illness, right? And so. I don't know how you parse that in an individual basis. It actually makes no sense, but so it creates this concept of primary diagnosis and secondary diagnosis, which. Again, I would contend is actually an artificial distinction, like that people are people and the diagnosis is not primary or secondary. But that is firmly driven by the insurance sort of system and then the federal government, right? And so I think we do okay. I would say I'd give us a solid, B- probably. I think it was like a C before I got there, so it's progress. In terms of working together, and actually Katie and some other folks will talk about that a little bit more detail later. So it's a really important question, and I mean, really the heart of what we're talking about is how do we work together better to serve people as opposed to people as diagnoses, and I think we're getting there, but there are some federal barriers.
Along those lines, is there opportunity, sorry, Lulu, is there opportunity on a federal level? Because I know CMS is getting more creative with waivers to do more of like a dual diagnosis waiver so that people do not fall. You guys have already.
Stay tuned.
Okay.
Dave?
And that relates to what we're talking about in your question too. So the per diem that pays for the group load, does that per diem also cover the behavior support, or is that still separately? Okay, so that's built into the daily rate? And the folks that are doing those services are what level professional?
That varies, honestly. I think our providers typically don't have that information involved, obviously, and then this, but whether they're directly providing that service or supporting the team that is providing the day-to-day service, varies.
Is the per diem consistent across the state for all locations, or is it vary?
All right, maybe one more and then get Holly on her way.
I just had one line.
Yes.
Great. So
I was looking at you.
I'm sorry. So I could talk about this all day. So can someone with a mental health waiver and with an IDD waiver, can they have both? Or does one, because of the primary and secondary, have to be first and then secondary? Like there isn't a way to do both currently, right?
So right now,
I just wanted to
there will be one based services.
based on, okay.
So there are some kids that are
that have, yes.
references.
Rats.
That's the only that they would be this, they're both community based and they're both home based. But it's
Richard one model.
So this is, I mean, you're getting at, I mean, to think what is the heart of this, I mean, silo is this sort of.
Yeah.
Primary, secondary. distinction, which we're not gonna solve, spoiler in this commission, but I think.
Well, we could make a recommendation.
It's worth at least talking about, right?
Right,
And
but we
and
could-
we can make
yeah.
a recommendation in the federal government as well. I
Right.
don't know if they'll pay attention to it, but we can do. So. And I know Zoe, you got high powered federal lobbyists. now, but we-
Yes, we do.
Yeah, and Senator Crider, I'll harass your colleagues in Washington.
Okay.
Great. All right, well, thank you so much, Holly. Really appreciate it. So, okay. First hour, well, wasn't planned this way, but the first hour was an overview. And obviously, the overview only gets you so far. Because, where the rubber hits the road is the provider level. And so after a short break, we're gonna have, hear from some actual providers doing this work in the community. Hear about barriers, hear about, challenges, opportunities, successes, and feel free to ask them some other questions too. So short break, we'll reconvene at 2:10.
So, should we let you know that? Yeah, like that, on that, you know, maybe. Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. Okay. I got marks done. Yeah. But I like, I think, it's helpful, that's like guaranteed, you know? That's like part of what we're doing. Like, it's not there. Right, because I'm on that. Yeah, I can feel like the next. Yeah. Let them know. Like, and a lot of us. Yeah, so it's. So, yeah. I know, right? Oh, okay, yeah, oh, yeah, so we can get going. Yeah, yeah, so I wanted to. I did too. So, I put all the work together and you're like, maybe. Yeah. Great start. Never give me that. Especially on like.
Good.
Ready for anything, right?
Conversation. Really just.
Funny and Jack have been talking a lot lately. She's like, there's something that really tried out.
I think they're so
I'm stopping you. Thanks to you, Sarah. I know, yeah. And there's no like.
So he. Yes. And. All of them.
Yes, they told me everything always. So I was the mom before I say.
Well, that's so what we have,
So I didn't break the whole thing. Like, yeah, blah, 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 blah. I mean, the other friend was like, take it to my mom. I was like,
then when
They're not my party. They're not. I think it should be married. Married to go to. That was on the county council card. Yeah, we've had money to clear out of the county, nobody never say what happened to it. The new revenue. Okay, I had Rockport, before the association redistricting, representative, Bartos. That's a really fun county. I think it looks aside, they don't get to do it. Rockport is, they're strong. It's hard to figure out the end of very good. District, so I don't. No, I did. About 15 years ago. Where you at now? It's a small town, so the freedom zone. I'm in North but I work. I really hard. I'm the administrator of What's kind of like maybe to stay grab on that. You know, I wanted to rent for Larry Sean. Yeah, you have to be wealthy of some sort or have something. And I don't have a debt, I just have a mortgage, but that's. Yeah, well, I'm not, Mark is fine. It's fine. Oh, were you? And that's where I knew you were going.
I think that's a crap that was,
Good luck tonight. He's pretty confident. That's been.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Well,
I'll bring my county.
like just recently.
Just recently.
What for?
I'm always the one that.
Different reasons? Sorry about that.
Yeah.
All right, welcome back. Before we jump into our little higher discussion, there's.
I'm having empathy for those of you sitting here and hearing all of this stuff coming at you, and you're kind of like, what did they just say? And so I want to give you a super easy illustration that's helpful in our world for you to understand. Because a behavioral consultant is not a behavioral consultant. So what you heard about today is really the two big chunks of service delivery options. One is what we call SGL, which is supervised living. And it is an institutional model according to CMS, but it's not like razor wire and hard windows like some people believe. If you have the opportunity to get services from a group home or an SGL, it's like that group home agency holds an umbrella. And under that umbrella are all the services that you could possibly need. So if you need a behavioral consultant, they have a relationship with a behavioral consultant. If you need a nutritionist, they have all of those things in there, right? When you achieve independence, you can go to what we call community-based services or the waivers, which is another large chunk of services. You as the individual client will be on this, and you say, I need a behavioral consultant, and I'm gonna pick this person to be mine. I need this service from a residential company, and I'm gonna pick that person to be in my life. And so the umbrella being held is either by the agency and group homes, or by the individual along with their case manager and waivers. That's a big distinction. So when you're talking, even though we both have behavioral consultants, the behavioral consultant in group homes or SGLs, the behavior plan has to be written by someone who has at least a bachelor's degree, and it has to be approved or signed off on, or consultation available from someone with a master's degree. In a waiver situation, and I'm home and me and my case manager, I've decided I need a behavioral consultant. You're getting a master's level clinician currently with doctoral level supervision. But you're making the choice of who you want. So I hope that makes it a little bit easier, because when we start talking about this, I guarantee you, whether you're talking about first responders, Department of Corrections, people in mental health, people just say group home. And that is really not just the only service, because waivers are very good. Okay, thank you for that.
Kelly will be back. So, great, all right, well, if this room made sense, we would all be sitting on a table, typical panel, but we're not gonna do that. Because you could not see us, but we'll be able to hear us, so. This is supposed to be a moderated discussion with people doing the work. And it will, this will be able to follow the format. So, like I said, we talked about an overview of the system, and hopefully that was helpful and gave you some background. I don't know. It will give us good footing for the rest of the afternoon. But you know, obviously, the best intentions of people who are designing, overseeing the system, are only as good as you actually have this on. It's true. So we have here 3 service providers, and so I'm going to ask you to
this first time to introduce yourself and then maybe just talk about your dual diagnosis focused work and what's working well. And we'll get to the stuff that's in it. So, so here with Megan. What's going on?
My name is Megan Lamb. I'm a behavior consultant and team lead at iQuest Community Solutions, previously known as Insights. So we have fully transitioned over to iQuest. I am officially 15 years working with individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities. Every one of my careers I got previous to I coverage I touched on prior to working in this population, I worked already know what that is. So we had a lot of kids that came through that had dual diagnoses, but didn't have access to the services they needed at the time. And then prior to that, I was from United Health, so which is a large population of individuals who have intellectual development disabilities, most so what is going well? I will say in 15 years that I've been working specifically in this field, there are more and more providers being willing to listen, being willing to be educated, especially on the diagnosed individuals. Over time, when I'm meeting with psychiatrists, depending on the psychiatrist who are doing that management, they are asking the staff's input. They are asking the behavioral consultants input, which is huge because you know, 10 years ago, it was okay, here's the meds that got here out the door. So the psychiatrists and the nurse practitioners that we are working with, that I at least work with, are more open to that. They are listening to what the teams are saying. There is an increase in the education that people are receiving about IBD and dual diagnosis. That's probably the good things that I see.
All right, Katie Adams, I'll say at the Environmental Commission alum, she's a lot of things. She's welcome back.
Yeah, I didn't really get them either. So I'm thinking Adams and visits, a Southwest for maybe a talk there in Evansville, one of the health centers in the state of Indiana with 24. And so we provide including really awesome local crisis work and the full crisis continuum as part of it. I think they built that. So we're really close to the NHA. What I'm going to talk about specifically today, though, is our efforts with the NHA's community adults. We are one of the awardees with the NHA. And with this innovative project, people are able to build something super successful, innovative, and develop. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about what it is and what the successes are. And I have our first year outcome report. So I'm just going to share it with you guys. So this program began in January of 2023. So this report is calendar 2023. So this model kind of came out of the idea of, gosh, our character kids are so silent, right? And as we talked earlier, there's this legacy, I don't know what to call it, because I don't even really remember. There's always this belief within community mental health centers of, oh, we don't do that, right? We don't do that. You have to have a primary diagnosis of mental health, because if you don't, then our consumer counts will be lower and our funding will be cut. So that's like, I'm not saying it's true, but that's like the belief. It's just like, oh, we gotta watch our primary diagnosis, have an autism. So trying to overcome those barriers and know that we're going to get the funding regardless of what we do, we came up with this local model where we collaborated with Easterfield Rehabilitation Center. So local agencies, they have services that we don't have, we have services they don't have. I don't want to do these services that they're doing, because they're doing awesome. And they don't want to do what I'm doing because I'm doing this, right? And so we truly created an integrated model. So this isn't like a, oh, we have an MOU. This is, we are an integrated multidisciplinary team. And so that includes nutrition, psychology, psychiatry, mental health therapy, care coordination, occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, and audiology. So everything you can possibly think of for these complex kids that come to our agency. So what's really unique about this is one barrier for families is I don't know where to start, right? So they go to their family doctor and honestly, their family doctor doesn't know where to start either, right? So a very common next step is, I think we need to get a comprehensive evaluation from a psychologist because we need to figure out what's going on before we even do anything, right? So anybody know how long the waiting list is for a comprehensive psychological evaluation? 2 years? Okay, so another thing to mention is, I think it's important, is I am also a English student. I have a child with IEP program in the house, so I live this. And I couldn't navigate the system, and I'm a licensed clinical teacher, right? So just putting that out there, all right? So instead of saying, we don't know what's wrong, with getting comprehensive evaluation and having the family suffer, right? Bad school outcomes, constant, parents can't work, constantly have to get their kids and, you know, all of that turmoil. We take the referral and we respond in 72 hours. So within 72 hours, we are meeting with the family to provide care coordination. Okay, and part of that care coordination is what are the immediate needs, right? Maybe friends, maybe, you know, those kind of things. And then the other part is gaining an understanding of what the problems are. And some of that involves screening tools. And these are screening tools that all of those disciplines that I mentioned are instructing them to do. Okay, so they're collecting the family history, they're collecting all the screening tools, they're bringing it together, and then we have what we call a staffing meeting. And in that staffing meeting, all of those disciplines are present. And they all talk about this family, the care coordination with the coordinator at this point, knows what we need now, okay? So within 30 days, we have a staffing meeting, and we're talking about the family, and speech will say, yeah, I think we need to speak about. Psychology will say, yeah, I think you need a second. OT might say, no, I think you need one. Okay, so instead of like shoving everybody into the same really comprehensive evaluation and all these things and waiting 2 years, we're figuring out where we need to start. Okay, so then we get that referral. And these folks are getting the evaluations that they need within 30 days. And it's because we're not shoving everybody down the same conveyor belt, right? It's immediately meeting with the family, helping them with skills and parenting skills to do in the process, right? Getting them involved on crises, finding out where we need to start. So the comprehensive evaluation I'm talking about, again, this is a team that works together in the same building. Without involvement. And then they have a feedback session. So after all of that, all those disciplines come back together, talk to the family about what we've done, how we can care things. And then we have team meetings regularly, so that there's issues we can discuss about the family, all the disciplines are up, right? And so this has been hugely successful, not only from an access standpoint, but quality of care standpoint. People are getting what they need when they need it, rather than being on a wait list for 2 years to find out, oh, I didn't even need to start there, right? The other challenge is that anybody have any idea of how often the psychological evaluations get approved by insurance? Maybe 50%. Okay, and you know what the answer is from insurance is, well, we need to try some therapy. Well, I don't know what therapy to do for a while, and you know, that's the point of the evaluation, is to find out what we can work out. So I'm just gonna throw some darts in the dark and just do my best until the insurance is necessary. So we are overcoming all of those barriers. And so we're providing care in homes, in schools, in our office, whatever families want to do. The most surprising success is in nutrition. Is insurance paying nutritional services, but that's the most impactful. So if we look at our parent survey, we most love servers for nutrition. So I don't know if you know how some of these kiddos with IED and not health concerns are, but they a lot of things like that all make these three things, right? Texture is a big issue. I'm only going to eat chicken nuggets and fries, and that's their entire diet, right? Our nutritionist is like engaging with these families, coming up with goals, and now they're eating eggs and vegetables, and they're gaining weight. They're not these sticks anymore. They're healthy. So what does that do? Right? So we're dealing with the whole person in this truly collaborative fashion. And as you can see with our outcomes after our first year, you know, the biggest success for me is on that list. It said 100% backlogs. 100% of the caregivers report that they now feel confident dealing with their child's complexities. And that's everything. They said we're providing services to training parents, feel confident after all the struggle they've been through, now that they're confident. So that's a success.
And all that.
Yes, I mean, my name is Ann Titus, and I work the operational vice president for benchmarking and services. We're a rather large provider, but our biggest team is Indiana. Our home base in Indiana was started about 65 years ago. Much like organizations like our advisory of parents on board, for their kids. Today we are providing services in 18 different states, and that has really happened, since 2005, 2006. As related to, this project, we are a provider of the service that homes them. And so we're a rather large provider in the state of Indiana, and we think about, home community-based services, the waiver, both family support and a comprehensive waiver. And then we also, have 42, SEL. So the traditional group homes, and we licensed institution, we have 42 of those across the state of Indiana. The cool thing, that I think is amazing, when Indiana closed its institution in 2004 to 2007, we were innovative, at that time. We opened those homes for adult support needs that I mentioned. She also mentioned the homes for folks with medical needs. Many states, I have the opportunity to work in other states and actually sitting on a committee like this, in the state of Montana, which I cover, and we're just now talking about how to serve those complex medical or behavioral needs in the community setting. So I'm very proud of the work that we did, back in 2003 through 2007, as our, true institutions, our stable institutions closed, that I gave us the springboard, right, to serve this population. Maybe not enough, you know, how there's 22 homes, they're all full dead. Is that enough? Who knows? But I think that's part of the institutional modernization that we talked about on that committee, and we talk a lot about what our needs are. Our population has changed. I saw the community of Rose and Holly, and I've been very Holly for I'm 32 years, and I've had the privilege of working for the company I work for today, the Intern. So I've grown out of the ranks as a DSP, as a regional manager. I've been with the ICF, with the SPL program, for my entire 22 years. However, I've had many opportunities both in Indiana and other states to do home community services, to do a lot of specialized residential services for folks with significant needs that is not for appropriate funding, appropriate staffing, appropriate behavior support, appropriate nursing, would have nowhere else to go. And much like the family you were speaking of, a lot of the families, by the time we interface with them, they've been struggling for years and years. We're seeing a lot of emerging populations within residential service. One is a group of younger people, which I think others have alluded to. Folks who are coming to us with way traumatic background, folks coming to us through maybe PCS, placement through DOE, aging out of the systems and then coming in. Our female population has changed drastically over the last several years, and so we're looking at services through a trauma-informed lens. For our individual population, this population is presenting pretty happy. I think that as a state, we did a lot of good things. I think we still have room to grow. You know, there's been kind of a reincarnation of some crisis, global crisis in the state of Indiana, which is imperative during folks who are in the guidance. Another good thing that I think we've seen is we've seen more psychiatrists and more therapists be going to serve our population. You know, a lot of times we hear that our folks aren't eligible for inpatient treatment because they can't participate in groups. And we have worked with several different mental health providers who are providing adaptive dialogue behavior therapy or cognitive behavior therapy to our folks. And then our BPs, our behavior control, that important concept, and we're reinforcing that in home. So I think we're starting to see a little more holistic here, of folks with intellectual disabilities and incorporating mental health disorders, but also with that, we have a lot of.
So the next question is more about like barriers and threats, but I'll ask a very specific question, Katie, which is related to the idea, because I mean, you described a wonderful model and program, which is great funding, Right, and we were honored and excited to give you that grant. Wonderful with it. But we also know that grant funding inherently has a. Right, we can't sustain any of this with just grants. It's just not possible. So talk about how you see the sort of financial sustainability of your particular model, and then kind of open up more broadly to others.
Sure, so I don't know if everybody's familiar with what CCPHCs are, so I'm just gonna mention what that is for a minute. It stands for Certified Community Behavioral Health Clinics. And this is a national movement where community health centers are transforming into this new model. And this new model has 94 services you're required to provide. They give you 500 like different requirements and checkboxes and things that you have to do, including transparency with outcomes and lots of data. Okay, so that's what this certified community behavioral health clinic is. DMHA just submitted their application to be for Indiana to be a demonstration state for CCBHC emerge transform in the UK. And so what we're hoping is good news and good news, right? And Southwestern is one of the pilots of it. So if you maybe get an awarded, then that means that we'll be able to talk about CCBHC. So what's the benefit to me of CCBHC? Well, one is better access, better care, better way of showing outcomes, and better way of being paid. Okay, so the payment is based on what's called perspective system, and so what we do is we create a cost entity. So we submit all of our costs to provide these services and what our encounters are. And the encounters are a list of CPT codes essentially. So all of these things are considered encounters. This is a list that is not considered. But every time I provide an encounter, I get the PPS rate. I don't get 2 in a day, but I get one that day, but I do one. And so the wonderful thing about this is that psychology is an encounter. Nutrition is going to be an encounter, right? And so moving forward, our services will be able to be paid based on our costs for those services. Now, the barrier for us right now is that occupational therapy is sort of one of those like, is it or isn't it? My opinion, it absolutely is. Right? So I am hopeful that we will see that in our reports, the cost of the OTs for the OT service will be an encounter that we can get the PDF rate for that service. Speech therapy, also not a price. I can make an argument that speech therapy is an essential medical service, right? Well, that can be. PT and audiology, I did, that doesn't really have to be. But if we can include everything that we're doing in this model, it will be paid for through the together. If we can't include everything in the model, then that means we're gonna have to disrupt what we're doing. We're gonna have to carve out the things that are gonna be paid for, and then have these things to the side and do our very best to try to get them care. But the problem is these team meetings that I'm talking about, who pays for that time? Very expensive, right? And I did the insurance says that's too expensive, I'm thinking that, but think about how much time is saving. And how much better the care is by having the whole team there. Families doing the same thing, we're all doing the same thing. Saves so much time and has better outcomes. So the sustainability plan is TCBHC. And then I'm hopeful that OT speech can be included in that, and if not, I'm not going to grants. Because that needs to be.
Katie, I just want to add that we recently, so I'm not sure American Psych Training, we have a new federally approved caregiver training code, which should cover for some of that time. So that's another incentive to include.
Yes, well, if you can provide the code together, so then you can advocate for that.
Not me.
It's all about this list, and it's listed in client. Right.
It's not, the point is, this is all, we're in the community of CCBHC, and you'll hear this a lot moving forward, is that it is in its response to community needs in a way that models. Right, so I just wanted to flag that it's not just about, like, we're talking about CCBHC, it's imperative that we support it as a commission moving forward. And we put forth, the dollar amount we need to sustain and expand this in our report. And we'll do that, I'm confident we'll do that, but it's important for us to realize it's not just, the common thread here is serving the needs of people in communities, not based on diagnosis, not based on insurance, not based on like whatever decision was made 30 years ago that's currently in the code, which is currently how we operate, it's the way it is. So yeah, I want Katie to highlight that is it's not just about, you know, the reimbursement model, it's about all exclusively, and we talk about potatoes next month, it's the same thing, right? And so get ready for a broken record, CCPAC or whatever, because it is vital. So with that kind of slightly more, this, yeah.
Is the other thing that's not on the empowerment is care coordination. So while I talked about all that, like pre-intake stuff, I don't have diagnosis today. I'm just gonna spend the time with family and provide the services they need, and we're not gonna get paid for it. But that's a $50,000 a year. So that is a cost that we do in our profit. Right? I don't want to diagnosis stand, but it's a cost. And it's a service that we're providing. It's not an dollar, so we can put it together, but hopefully it all works in a way that we're said. We're figure that.
All right, so similar barriers, that's changes on horizon.
So Jim mentioned this in his saying, Kelly, I have to talk about this, but, and it's been mentioned several times by multiple people here, the individuals that we serve are more than their diagnosis. And unfortunately, the diagnosis that gets the most noise is the diagnosis of the system when they're assigned to. So if they're going in suicidal ideation, like in the acute care, whatever that is, they're going to be found through the noise. They may also have a diagnosis of autism, or they may have a diagnosis of cerebral palsy, or they may have, you know, another developmental disability. So they're going through the mental health system, but they have all these services over here that they also need access to. Same thing, if you get an individual whose primary diagnosis is autism, but they also have depression, that they're going through the IDD waiver system. There's all these services over here that are all those individuals with access. And I'll give you a very specific example of one of my clients. I have a client who has autism, who's been diagnosed with autism, who's 50 years old. He also has a diagnosis of traumatic stress disorder. He recently used to my life issues that happened. Every single mental health provider we have tried to access and say he has this diagnosis of PTSD. Oh, no, that's not. No, it's not PTSD. Oh, that's just the behavior because it was awful. No, these are behavior because it's PTSD. So basically, up until the last 9 months, and we kind of inadvertently omit the diagnosis of autism to get him access to some ways of services. Because every place of service provider that saw him and saw that autism diagnosis said, oh, he wants an ADA clinic. He has not. He just needs to go to ADA. What else for help with the autism issues? We need help with PTSD issues. So once again, the system that you access is the system that gets, or whatever system makes the most noise. Once again, we have an individual who is in a mental health crisis. We have somebody who is actively suicidal. We have somebody who needs maybe acute placement. We can't necessarily access that because he has, maybe that individual has a diagnosis of intellectual disability. For some agencies, there is, oh, we don't serve those. We won't take those individuals into our care system because they're professionals. There are other agencies who will not take individuals who may need to be there because they don't have the diagnosis of intellectual disability. So they're too smart for our programs. We've heard. I've heard personally. So it's hard for our individuals to access services and get quality comprehensive services because it almost ends up like a one situation. Other things that happen
I get it, it's about money, it's about revenue. Sometimes our plans just need that. They just need somebody to monitor their needs. Now, I have a question for you guys. If you are diagnosed with cancer, who do you go see? Do you go see your general practitioner? No, you go see an oncologist, right? Okay. For many of our individuals, they are getting their med management through a general practitioner. Because psychiatrists either won't see them because they have a diagnosis of IBD. Or those agencies are also requiring them to participate in other programs within that agency that may not be beneficial or may not be needed. For the, so for some individuals, in order to get psych care, they also have to have a behavior clinician through their mental health program. That's often on top, but they also have a behavior consultant, behavior clinician, for kind of through the way. Sometimes they're required to have therapists, to have med management. When is the last time any of you tried to access a therapist through a program that provided services? They're very few. I'll be honest. And I have clients that are on their third or fourth therapist in about 18 months, period. Because there's such a rapid turnover in therapists in these programs. For a lot of reasons, I'm good for those reasons. But so those are some of the big barriers. Another barrier, those acute post-crisis services. Now, I will say they are getting better. Depending on where you are in the states, accessing crisis services in the rural areas is still more difficult. But let's say I have a client who is expressing suicidal ideation. So they have to walk in order to even be admitted. They have to walk in, they have to say, I'm going to kill myself, and I'm just not going to carry it. Okay? Kelly's laughing. But it's true. If you have somebody that has limited verbal skills, and they say, I'm going to walk out in traffic, but you have staff, they can just stop you. Okay, we're going to send you home. So they may be seen at one hospital, 3 days later, they're seen at another hospital. Maybe they have a provider that's through a community mental health program or a hospital program, but they may not be going to that hospital for the acute care because the provider's going to take them over to the hospital to go. So then I have clients, or I personally have clients that have met this long. Because every time we go to a different hospital for a acute crisis situation, they get another medicine. We have a client who we did a review, he was experiencing some physical experiences, some major mental health issues. We did a review, I felt like we did a review of this medication. He was prescribed 3 medications that were listed on his allergies by providers. Yes. So there's a huge breakdown in that communication. Where is all this information? I have to walk around about this stuff. But so really there's a huge breakdown in that access to services. There's a huge breakdown in the communication among service providers. And there's a very large breakdown in those acute or crisis needs. When their home setting isn't the appropriate setting for them at the time, maybe we need somewhere for them to go for a week and get their meds adjusted, where they're safe and they're secure, and that's probably not going to be home. Because it's not going to be safe for them, it's not going to be safe for the staff, and it's not going to be safe for our hospitals. So having that a huge place for them to go, we can do med management, med adjustments, seeing how they do when it's not in the home, it's not in the community. Are a few of the many barriers. I think that covers most of what. Yeah, that's all I got.
And open up the question.
As far as barriers, I would say, access to mobile crisis. Is a huge barrier to state in Indiana. Like I said, in 2007, when the development center was being a state regulation. That's a good result on that. I think that, and Indiana, mentioned, and so our need to help with the technology. I mean, however, a lot of and community services are being treated by. And as well trained as they are, is an issue. One is, it's not what they should be doing with their time. And two, they're gonna transport to inpatient site. Our folks are not gonna get admitted, they're gonna get rubbed up and sent home on medications that we probably are not going to monitor. Which is an unfortunate thing. So I think local prices continue to be a barrier. There are some pockets of local prices within our state at this point. But I do think that continues, and I think that would stand all the, families with those at home, and people who aren't yet in services, and people who are in home community services, and maybe some SGL providers as well. So I think that big barrier that continues to exist. The other barrier, as far as the big ones, I think, is just the, and I think we both related to this, but the level of understanding of our population with community clinicians, is pretty poor still. Being in the industry for 32 years, I've been able to see some of the positive changes, which I mentioned, but every positive thing I mentioned that we've come a ways on, so it's fun. And so I too serve some folks who have pharmacy issues or prescribed style meds, and then we try to start meeting them away. I also agree that acute inpatient sometimes is necessary for folks, just like it would be for any of our family members, and our folks are excluded from that level of care within our communities on a pretty routine basis. So as far as like big overarching areas that affect quality of life, I think those would be my other top three.
Thank you, yes. So I think kind of both of them mentioned it, just to highlight, I think there's still a lot of stigma associated to, for instance, like what autism means. I think people have a picture in mind of what that is, or it's not. So I think a lot of it is community understanding of what this is and isn't. But I'll also share, I have a master's degree in social work, it's not like a paid class about this. I mean, we went through the diagnostic things like you mentioned, but that was essentially it, right? And so I'm now a therapist and I don't know what to do. And so some of the resistance that these folks are mentioning is sort of like, well, I don't know how to do that content. And so they're saying no, which is fair, right? So I think training is, it's about a cultural thing too. That's like, I'm at the Health Center, and I can tell you that when we started this program, there was some reaction from people like, oh, we're going to start saying no to people, and so that's a cultural thing, like, oh, we don't do that, we don't do that. So I think there's cultural things that we need to overcome within our systems, and it's not like out of need. It's just like, oh, I don't know how to do that. And so we train our staff on how to work with this population. And we also need this basic understanding of what this is.
All right, couple questions.
Katie, do you have an estimate on what it's costing you to do this program now?
Exactly the number on there.
Well, just on average, like on average, like.
Oh, my ears.
I don't know.
Okay.
But I do, currently I have the data, like what insurance we were able to build it yours for versus what we had in the tax agreement. So that's data I can. And that's really the story, right? And
Right.
that, yes, we get the fee for service for these pieces, but the fee for service is not even covering our cost of that service, let alone the company's.
I also love the idea of presenting the data with cost savings better. I think that would be very impactful.
So we're planning to do that. So our first year was really like, Takes in the job. So year two is that it's going to be about like, okay, now that we figured out what this knowledge would be, this is not actually costs and hopefully we save. And University of Southern Indiana has committed to do a longitudinal study with our clients, which is awesome. To have a look at that That's hard to predict, right? Things are going really great a year later, but nothing's fine. And what cost savings. Yeah, so I agree, I think that's something that we don't have yet, but will and should. To inform what they.
Question for you. So the capacity for the grant funded program, how many families or individuals do you serve at a given time with your current resources?
Well, we see everybody with a
So
17.
there's no exclusionary criteria.
Everybody, 72 hours, and what might happen is that care coordination, stay, you might figure out that, well, this is what you need to do this, and so we do more hand off to that, so we don't actually necessarily see everybody for evaluation, it's just care coordination, but what we're doing.
Is that your max capacity then, or could you
No,
serve more families?
No, I don't even think, I mean, we're still hitting our targets. The only target is not quite where I want to be, is how long it takes to get a second round, because sometimes, so what it says, but it's 60. And we get 32 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So Megan, how many folks can you work with at a given time? How many people can you serve?
I think I have 15 clients right now, but that's only because I have other roles. I think at my max. If somebody's only doing behavior consulting, and they're not doing other stuff like supervision, and things like that, probably between, I would say, I mean, between 20 and 25 is a good. Kind of just kind of good down. Now. That's a mix of things. You know, if you have clients who are only every week or maybe on the consult basis, you can have a little more. If you have clients that are just doing twice a week, you're doing a lot of intensive stuff with them, you're probably gonna have some caseload because you can't handle all of those individuals because it's gonna break down. So usually between 20 and 25 is where we see people in that caseload.
Those are fee for service based services to pay by the hour.
So yes, so through the Medicaid waiver, everything is, a unit is 15 minutes,
Yeah.
so we bill 15 minutes. But the cool thing about the waiver is that they get to decide how much or how little services that they need. So they have a budget amount, like, like that 26,000 for the data support waiver, they get to decide what services they want. And they can say, okay, I think we need an hour to do the services of the, okay, so that's gonna cost this much, so then those can be adjusted. I have times that, you know, I'm seeing them for maybe an hour and a half a week, but I'm also doing a lot of consulting and things like that. So I have clients that have bigger budgets, and I have clients that have smaller budgets, and that's all individualized, and that's what the people that have a waiver is that we can individualize that. But it's billed to Medicaid on in 15 minutes. And on the flip side of that, the SGO, the months, those are the VA, or the Medicaid grant or behavior condition, they involve. So that helps you kind of be kind of, and their role is like a lot of training, observation, all sorts of things. So I really like it depends on the activity of the function of the program. Like I would never have.
The folks doing the work salary then, or do they?
It was only agency. Yeah.
So I'm not sure if this is really a question, but from the state perspective, as a legislator, I'd be curious to know how many of those people that aren't getting those acute mental health services are ending up in jail. And how do we work towards?
And that's concerned with, having a call week, right? Because that's one of our folks, it's an officer, they may be charged for, and our folks, sometimes, are very considered, and that is all with a lot of employers. And so then we're trying to navigate the legal system with our folks. So other folks that are serving in an extensive support income, I would say about 25 to 30% of them come through the jail system at some point. And so when we look at cost of services, you can't stop, right? You have to look at cost of correctional care, you have to look at state plan care, when folks are hospitalized for 300 days.
Well, if they stay hospitalized, we have 100 patients right now. And that's $1,700 a day,
Yeah.
so. This is not, you can't stop.
It's interesting when we look at the cost of many of the roads, because you do have to change the where, you know, and the population in the extent of supporting, you know, the amount of folks that have had long-term, psychiatric placement, state facilities, like, I don't think they're in jail, or, you know, in hospitals and couldn't get out. That's a huge cost to any system, whether it's state or whether it's.
You're-
People, it talks about the need for prevention, the risk of the appropriate. It seems like primary care providers, when looking at, people, and things, they're, or all those.
Oh, sorry, I didn't finish that statement.
Yeah, sure.
So, yeah, we're smart on track. So. I always recommend to my clients that if they're gonna get that management, that they get it through a psychiatrist. Psychiatrists who don't use much of training, they should be saying how to do meds, what meds to doing, what elements are using, what the trends are. The general practitioner is great for general stuff. But when it comes to psych meds, I really encourage all of my clients to see a psychiatrist. But once again, it's very difficult to access a psychiatrist that's willing to, and who was it? Somebody said something about needing a diagnosis, a mental health diagnosis and access. Is that okay? So I have a historical client, just to give you an example. He had a diagnosis and was active service and doing very well in the mental health center. New psychiatrist came in and said, "Oh, no, I saw him 15 years ago and I gave him this diagnosis. This diagnosis has been correct. The diagnosis they changed it to did not meet the community mental health center's requirements, and so they kicked him out of the community mental health center, which not only did he lose his psychiatrist, he lost his day program provider, he lost friends, and it was like an overnight thing. Note this diagnosis changed, see you later, bye. So when you have somebody who has an intellectual or developmental disability, which she has, so then all of a sudden he's lost support that he had for years just because of the diagnosis. So this is your workforce.
Yes, I understand that sometimes because she runs space back, or the CNG, they try to solve the primary care, I don't give them advice. I know that, there's some work that I do in school with reading this kind of program, and have that kind of support, which is great. And our first psychiatrist for me. So, I mean, so that's like.
That's your becoming a huge influx and work of them. So I'm one I work with a friend company that all of our we're very much in a long relationship. But we also are in areas where we've been right, so we've been on standing. But you know, we've seen this influx of practitioners and it's gotten in the system, right? The issue that I think has changed with psychiatry over the years is a lot of the folks who don't have admission privileges, they don't have hospital privileges. And so that's a disconnect, right? So when somebody does go inpatient and they're gonna do psychiatrist, new med, new diagnosis, and then they come out and say, oh, this is endemic, like what's happening? And then we have to go back through and take, try to detox a little bit and get them back, you know, to their norms, right? And so the relationships that we have with psychiatrists are yours, for that person.
All right, well, we'll probably have a lot more discussion. Thank you so much. All right, we're gonna. Let's not, you guys take a break, take a break.
Is it better?
Yes, you're up.
So, I'm excited because I get to talk about like things like fairy dust and other things, you know, like solutions, right? And it's very exciting. And I was trying to write down all the things you guys said I was going to say, so, I'm gonna talk this kind of quickly. I'll say it. Oh, we did our stuff. So. sort of an underlying theme here that is helpful for all of us to understand, because we talked about post-World War II and the culture, the change in not having even the recognition of what dual diagnosis was in the 80s. We're also working with ineligibility where you're defined by the worst day of your life. Right? So think about whether it was 15 years ago or 15 days ago, the worst day of your life to find everything that you might get in a support system. That is what we deal with. So one of the first questions that Jay asked me, which led to the meeting today was, do you know anywhere in the country they have a dually funded program to support people with dual diagnosis? In other words, you have dollars coming in from the state government's developmental disability funds and the Division of Mental Health funds. And I was like, okay, I was like real excited because Jay asked me to do something, and I went, and within like 30 seconds, we realized it's impossible because of the federal rules. Because you have to be one or the other. We had follow-up conversations, and I said, yeah, I used to do development in 7 different states across the country before I was a provider in Indiana. And they taught me at my previous job, the first question you ask is, in your state, do I want to have it? At that time, we said diagnosis of mental retardation, or would I get better services if I had a diagnosis of mental condition? That is still the reality of the federal rule. So that's Medicaid as a medical model, and back when we looked at, behavior modification and rights restrictions and all that stuff, that all happened. And now we're moving towards that person-centered model, which is really focusing more on positive approaches. The fact that all people, no matter what they may or may not be able to learn, or no matter what their value system is or where they come from, everybody deserves the pursuit of happiness, right? And we're looking at how we get there. And so one of my favorite things that I've heard Jay say several times, and I think we all agree with, is people are people. Let's talk about humans who have things that we know they need to have the best chance of getting happy, best chance of their best life. And I think culturally, the greatest thing in combination of the silos between DDRS and DMHA is that we all believe that. We want people to get what they need. So like low-hanging fruit, obviously don't get people like people and not diagnoses. That's much harder to do than it is than you can imagine because of the rules. The other thing is just simplifying, making sure that people know which door to go in and how to get in the right door. And it'd be great if we didn't have to have a right door. If we could figure out ways to achieve the breaking down the silos would be really helpful. Next. Reducing duplicative efforts, and I know those of you that serve us as legislators, you're gonna love this. When you do the same thing 3 times, it's more expensive than if you just do it the right way the first time. Duplicative efforts. I walked into a home one time with a 16-year-old, and he's like, hey, how are you? I was just meeting him this family for the first time. And there was another professional sitting at the table who was not part of the state like him. And I was like, hi, I'm Kelly, I'm a behavioral consultant. He's like, you're not the behavioral consultant, I'm the behavioral consultant. And I'm like, I was trying to be nice, I was like, who do you work for? You know, I couldn't find this out. And he was there as a behavioral consultant, doing wraparound services through DMHA funding. And I was there as his waiver behavioral consultant. Now, think about this from a treatment perspective. If I know this person has trauma and I'm going through a trauma lens trying to really help somebody achieve different things, and that person doesn't know that because that's not the focus of things, it can be really damaging to have 2 people with the same titles. The individual doesn't understand, the parents don't understand, the whole system's confused. And what's really interesting is the DMHA team of service providers does not work the DDRS service providers. So 2 different teams achieving 2 different directions. And it can just, it's not only duplicative, but I think you really need to look at how do we clarify roles. This is why it's about low-hanging fruit. This shouldn't cost us anything to change some names. Because there's wraparound being done with the bachelor's levels through DMHA programs, but to get that to the waiver, you have to have a master's level with doctoral supervision. It's just very, very confusing. And really, we should at least call each other something different so that it's easier at the quick service delivery for people to understand. As for the people like me, who have worked my whole life in the waiver program, in group homes, my favorite SGLs. I don't know everything I need to know about what happens in the mental side. I don't think that everybody who works in mental health services probably knows everything about the other kinds of supports that somebody might have. So we also talked about, earlier, you guys were talking about the community, and I think I used to get mad when people didn't understand our folks, and now I'm much older and wise that I have gray hair now. I've learned that people are afraid, including myself, about things I don't know. Right, and so we have to find ways, and we think about capacity building, not just teaching teams and not just teaching families, but teaching our whole community ways to destigmatize anyone who is in this population of neighborhood. Next. We talked about this, we could beat this for like a dead horse, right? We have to stop with the myth that people who work in the community mental health don't work with people. Right, and people in the system of community mental health history that can say, we don't work with people like that. And I think that goes back to number one, is to let people and figure out how to do what we can within the federal rules, to make sure people are getting what they need. Next. So considering some systemic gaps and address, but. So while we talked a little bit about this, I think it's important to think about the all, right? There's more than 100,000 people in the state of Indiana that would qualify and be eligible for services in the services of intellectual development facilities. What we have is about 35,000 people who are in the services sector. And what we know is that probably 17,500 at least, when you think of half, are dealing with dual diagnosis. And what we know is that another rules. And so what Holly was talking about, just to give you a little bit more detail on the services. Typically, people will live in group homes, so it's about 2,500 group home beds, the general group home beds. ESM homes are for the folks with tough behavioral situations, that's 88 beds total in the state. EMN, which is the extensive medical needs, we have 80 of those total in the whole state. And then we have a common community-based waiver, which is huge in numbers. So comparatively, we have 23,000. This is the federal data, by the way. Over 23,000 people who are getting intermittent services, meaning they're not in 24-hour services. And 9,000 are on the CIH waiver, which is they have access to the more comprehensive. Next. So this is what happens. If you're in one of those and you're doing great, that's awesome. If you have a crisis, then and this is where we have big gargantuan gaps. And DRS paid, was that 2017, Jim? I think the gap analysis study from the University of Indiana. I can send that to you the exact thing because we haven't done anything different. The gaps are the same. So if I have a crisis and it's not something that I can really deal with, if I'm living in the system in a 2-3 day hospitalization, if I don't get admitted, here are my choices. I'm going to go to prison. I'm going to go to states like Gap facility or other very, very restrictive things, right? There is no in between. Now there's pockets as we heard today. So we do have a mobile crisis program that Benchmark's doing, I think, in 9 counties. We have the collaboration that Southwestern's doing with, but again, that's temporary and we need to figure out how to make it sustainable. What we don't have, and we've talked about it in many iterations, I am going to announce that I've been here 35 years, so I'm just edging out colleagues that experience. I think our next grade should actually. But we have had iterations that I think we should have some specialized events for folks who are really young, where we have the supports that we need for those in crisis. We don't have broad global access to mobile crisis program. We don't have the specialized like a technical systems or capacity building, any sort of resource. One of the things that I will talk about a little bit is health homes, and I wonder if some of this collaborating that we're doing in Southwestern could be done in a health home model possible.
And we have people who liaise between DDRS and DMHA, sorry for that. As far as systems and operations and connecting people, but we don't have through contact or through, on the state side, a resource or technical assistance or sort of a place where we can access that training. So if you know, we need this training, this is where we get it. If we find out from trending, lots of people need help with better understanding, you know, the aging population and Down syndrome and all the iterations of behavior that sometimes happen in that population. That technical resource capacity building system could really address those needs and make that available globally. We also have no, not that I know of, I'm so excited to hear, we're not national districts, like you said, you were in a direction, right?
Psychiatric, yes, especially trained.
Yeah, so please don't take all the person because I think you're awesome. Because we don't have very many specialized, specially trained nurse practitioners or psychiatrists that really have a great interest in our population, let alone a willingness to sit down and work with the team towards better outcomes. And we have no subacute residential supports, and that's kind of that step down that you guys were talking about. Boy, I tell you what, one of my great loves in life is to work with the most challenging behavioral people, behavioral cases that you can find. I love it. You know, I can say I'm really good at is behavioral assessment. If I could tell you how much money I could save the state of Indiana by having a 30-day unit where I can look at people's medication and really work through detoxing people. It's like you guys said, they go to hospital. I had somebody that got transferred in 1 week to 3 different hospitals and came out. 1 week later, it was 70 medications. And you know what? That's also spending money that doesn't need to be spent. Because it doesn't matter if you're spending on a pharmacy or a hospital bed or whatever it is, all medication dollars. And at the end of the day, we're spending more money than we need to. And if you look at the technical systems training piece, Jay, my answer is that's one thing that could be funded from DMHA and DBRS and collaborative effort to really make capacity building a probability that would really impact the people who are duly diagnosed. Next. Oh, well, these are things that somebody was asking. So the serum in that, even though that's really technically licensed like a group home, it is more of a restricted facility in my mind. And there's only one left facility, well, a massive large facility, but there's 50 less. It's there's state psychiatric facility, like Jay said, we know that we have at least 100 people currently living there who have intellectual disabilities. Department of Corrections, I just did training there last week. They have a unit that they call the mentally deficient, which just makes my heart high, right? So, and maybe it's vernacularly within the Department of Corrections, but it's broad, right? And so when I think of a dual diagnosis capacity building resource for the community and for all people, it would also include the Department of Corrections, right? Everybody needs to have, we need to do better. The other thing that I'm naive to a degree, the guy that trained right before me, I did training on common core care, which was awesome. But the guy before me was doing training for every facility, 30 facilities, I believe, in the Department of Corrections, where people are incarcerated. They were doing training on communication books because we have that many people who are nonverbal. I promise you, if they are nonverbal and they're incarcerated, they have developed this. And that is frightening to me. You know, it starts with all the way through the system, but I just think we need to work harder. If you look at national trends, and he's working on getting specific numbers for me, it is likely of the 60,000 people who are incarcerated. These are not people who are on parole, these are people who are currently incarcerated in the state of Indiana, that likely 10,000 of them had some sort of special education, which would make them literally unlikely eligible for services in the needs. So my two big takeaways. One is to explore the health fund model. And it's not like necessarily patient live, it could be a program, right? Not to really tell me right, yeah, I don't know a lot of it, but I do know that it is made affordable in the Affordable Care Act, section 2703. And it allows a state
to say we're gonna spend this much money. And get a 90% match from CMS, and the qualifications are basically the folks that we talked about today. It does allow funding for up to 8 quarters, so it gives you a good 2-year start to figure out, is it effective, how can we make it sustainable, and how to move forward with that. And you can read a lot, there have been a lot of states that have done the home phone, and it looks different, and every program is very different in every state. But I do think it's something worth exploring. You can see it really does help. It's not very much for the 70. And so it might be a way that if we have a grant and look at how we continue with the sustainability of that better access to persons in their care and try to really look at the plus people. Next. Behavioral support is sort of a technical assistance and resource team. Talked a little bit about this, things that could be done, and this is something I've learned about in the last year, what's happening well in other states. They talk about the IPP grants. I'm the leader of the band for the Let's Redesign Behavioral Supports on the waiver. So that's the IPP grant that I'm coordinating. And so what I've learned is that there are things happening in other states that do take us to the next step forward in Indiana. One of those would be coming up with sort of a technical assistance and a resource team for a group of professionals that come together. Again, it's similar to what you guys are doing, but this would be accessible, potentially not just building capacity at every level of the system, but really offering specialized services through training and assessment for high community behavioral folks. Everybody, we talked about the worst case scenario folks that are really lost in the system, maybe incarcerated, are frequent users of high dollar services. If we had a high acuity team that could really work with them and look at what are the recommendations. But I'm sorry, I just saw somebody was prescribed 3 meds that they were allergic to, and then they're upset because it's like neurochair. Oh, okay. I mean, this is not. We need, I think we need to do better, and I think that I will speak for my own system of DD services. We have some amazing behavioral consultants across the state. They're tied to their caseload of 20 or 30 people. But not everybody can really work through and be objective in assessment for high acuity behavioral cases. And if we can do that, we can save them all one. The other thing to think about is the emergence of trauma-informed care and positive approaches in behavior management over the last really just in the late 80s, early 90s. Not all states have those best practices. So a lot of our service definitions and the way we do behavior management in Indiana in the waiver hasn't changed since 1995 when we first started really pushing for digitalization and getting people, into community center. So in some ways, we're still trying to treat people in an old way. We have allowed our systems to catch up with really unfair action. This group or center or resource would also help with how we get a global crisis in more than 9 counties. I'll be honest, and this might be a little bit more transparent than some people in the room have like. Our mobile crisis program was doing pretty well, and Benchmark was one of the providers. And we got new governor, new director, cut. And that happens a lot. Because when the door rotates, some things when you're just getting traction with this go away. And so that is a challenge that this position, if we could get it or center our group of people, they can help push things along, even if leadership changes. Next. I'm gonna go really fast because I know you guys wait a long time, but almost every table I've ever been at, and thank you, Jane, for reminding me that I've been at this table with 42 different names over the last 35 years. If I have one wish, my magic wand would be, please, can we do something for individual diagnoses? And then usually the reason, well, how are we gonna pay for that? Well, I tell you what, if we could get preventative instead of reactive with some of our strategies, this would be a non-conversation. We wouldn't be talking about money and all the big word, because the goodness of people's lives would reduce the cost of reactive. We have an opportunity in service redesign and addressing duplicative services with yield savings. I think we have labor redesign coming in, and pray to God that that doesn't get next, but 2 years, we're gonna see the outcomes of these IPP grants that are currently being funded. And what can we integrate into our service delivery system? There's some awesome opportunities in there to reduce costs of unnecessary hospitalization, over-utilization, institutionalization, and incarcerations, all shuns. All of those things can be reduced if we look at tweaking the system design to really look at meeting people's needs where they are. And increasing the quality of workforce would also reduce utilization. I'm gonna be honest, Indiana ranks 38 out of 50 states in master's level technology pay wage. The behavioral consultants in Indiana make an average of 20,000 less than the state average. So some of the folks that we have in behavioral work, and listen, I can get shot if somebody wants to say this publicly. This is a public meeting.
You gotta say it.
There's some folks doing behavior management, they think it's time on service on the business side. That probably needs to be resolved. We need really good people doing high acuity work, and we need people with big hearts and passion doing the other work. And some of the people who are doing it just for the money and aren't being efficient and aren't having good ethical practices, we need to maybe they didn't go to the side. They could be invited to be awesome sometimes, is what I usually say. So I think that in waiver design, we have an opportunity to really look at the workforce, but increasing the workforce of the people who want to do this work and you want to change lives of people with real diagnoses really should have the opportunity to do that and pay for their work. How's that?
Great. All right, any questions for Kelly?
So I just, being the advocate for community mental health centers and representing the community mental health centers, I want the commission to understand that the reason why autism is often said no is that it comes down to a payer standpoint and it comes down to those silos, not necessarily that we don't want to provide that care. So I just want,
I know, yes.
yes, but everybody else might not know that. They might just think, oh, it's that local community mental health center being difficult, but the level of unfunded services that we provide in autism is very expensive. That is why we say no to that. So fixing that waiver would help in bridging that.
That when someone says to me, I don't know how to work with someone like that, that is them protect, they're doing what they should have to do, which is not provide services to somebody else that's their practice. And I have a great respect for that,
Right.
but I don't want that to be okay for all people in the system.
Right.
We need to build capacity.
Right.
In that silo, in this silo, build a bridge between some.
I think one of the last things said is a really big challenge for this work, and that is like people need to do have a passion for it, heart for it. And it's hard to tell who's who in that space. It's not always the credential, it tells you whether or not they're committed to doing this work and doing it well. How do we, as a state, ensure those who are out there helping our families and kids are doing it for the right reasons, not
You have to make it so they can make a living doing it.
in that, for sure, 100%.
I used to, when I was CEO of I used to tell my HR team, everybody comes with 2 baskets. You have a basket of stuff that you were born with, and a basket of stuff I can teach you, right? I can teach anybody any skill or how to use a tool, but I can't teach you how to care. I can't teach you how to have a heart. And so there's gotta be a way, we have so many people. I have a team at MyQuest, we have, I think, 50 behavioral consultants now. Over 27 years that I was a CEO of an agency, 2 people left. Our people. 2 people left us as an employer. And they left the field. 1 person was invited to find other opportunities. No one left. Other than they can make better money in other systems. Now that's changed drastically since we've had a 9% increase since 1995 in our reimbursement rate. I think that's keep it.
It's a real challenge.
Just there out.
I think for this commission, how to try to write recommendations that ensure that only those that really do the right reason you're doing the work and those who aren't or not is a real complex issue. And how to go about trying to.
And we're in an exciting place in the Division of Disability and Rehabilitative Services silo, because they are redesigning the waivers. And we have a chance to tweak that, right? So you can't go, we could put controls on things so that the cost savings will then be able to retain the.
Well, I think we're excluding folks who really could do really good work in the state because of things like, qualification requirements and things like that, whereas those who are qualified, quote unquote, to do it, maybe aren't in for the right reasons.
I can promise you, if you're not qualified, I didn't think
Sure.
about a bunch of disabilities when I was in graduate school. Everything I learned about being a good human member of disabilities.
This is a great segment, actually. Yeah, we're almost done. We have one more speaker. Because the truth is that we've heard things about this whole process. None of this happens without workforce. And so, we have our workforce director, Keaton Woodward, we will see. Sort of like the chorus, every single meeting, sort of just to remind us that, hey, we gotta think workforce, so. Gina, before you start, I just want to make sure, if anybody here from the public that wants to make a comment. I didn't think so, but I want to say this. So turn it over to Gina and then we will talk and get out of here.
And I'll be super brief, and you stole my music analogy, so I'm so sad right now, but I was gonna talk about the fact that I'm here to provide the refrain, right? So you're talking about chorus, today's chorus is all about. That's right. Today's chorus is all about individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities, and I think I'm here to remind everyone that the refrain in this song that we are singing is workforce, because every single presenter, just like the last commission meeting, referenced workforce, whether directly or indirectly. But without qualified, very highly skilled, highly passionate individuals to do this work, we're in trouble. And so that's kind of where we're gonna start. So if you don't mind, go ahead and clicking. So I want to circle back to the fact that in the previous iteration of the Behavioral Health Commission back in September of 22, the report referenced workforce as the most, if not one of the most important factors that can be an obstacle in implementing any of the recommendations that come out of this work. There was also a reference to the fact that this is not anything that we can do with short-term solutions. Workforce solutions are going to have to be systemic. They're going to have to be the long game. There's not any Band-Aid that we have available to put on this right now. And I want to make reference to all the incredible experience that was referenced in the room. And I love that you all were sharing your years of experience, as it terrifies me. Because if we're sitting here with all of you folks leading the way with 30+ years of experience, we have a lot of work to do in building our talent. So that's one of the things that I'll kind of bring up. You can go ahead and go to the next slide. The commission also, oh, sorry, I think that maybe they're in a different order. That's okay. You can go to that slide, Cordelia. Thank you. They also brought up the fact that we absolutely can make an impact if we reduce shortages in workforce. And so there are lots of recurring themes that come up in this conversation. And so I'm going to continue. Again, this is my refrain. These are some of those themes that I think as a group, we can all keep an eye on to help us in planning for ways that we can improve the situation. Pipeline to practice is all about starting from very early on to that advanced level clinician. How do we bring more people to the field? How do we ensure that they're highly skilled? How do we improve recruitment and retention over time in this field so that we can ensure that those quality services are available to folks? We heard a little bit of history that to me referenced that words are important. That's all about highly skilled professionals doing this work. Workforce innovation, Katie, I get chills when I hear you talking about what's going on with your Catalyst grant, because it is the best example for us to think about today about how innovation builds capacity at the local level where it belongs. And I think that is the kind of thing in workforce that we're going to have to look at to be able to make have room to grow this field. And then finally, lots of references to reimbursement and compensation. Again, if we're bringing more people to the field to do more work at a higher level of quality, that means we're going to have to look at how we value them as part of this system. So I would just encourage the commission, as you are contemplating all of the things that you hear through these convenings, how we can also look at workforce as a solution to some of these challenges and opportunities that we have through things like education, policy, licensing, anything that we have in record related to reimbursement and funding. Those are the kind of spaces where workforce can really be applied as a solution to some of these needs. So I know we're at time and I'm gonna stop there. You'll see me again, probably same slides, and I'll probably say a lot of the same words because this is just an ongoing concept that we just want to make sure is solidified for everybody as we continue to discuss. So thank you.
Thank you so much. All right, well, that is our formal agenda. Let's open it up to any commission members for comments, discussion, observations.
I think we have an opportunity with the project that you and I and several members are going through with Panamax and then looking at workforce
Yes.
and that pipeline and ways we can strengthen that. I looked at the proposal to the gap in education space. I tried to pass a bill this year requiring nurses to have common form care training. Nobody likes new requirements. You should have seen my email related to that. We didn't get that done, but we'll continue to try to work on that. But it seems like there's a number of projects that are kind of all in play at the same time to give us some opportunity here to really make some progress.
Yes, Hannah will be here probably in June. for your meeting. You know, and so just for the report, just as a board, you know, I think that we're deliberately not trying to make recommendations on the fly here. To digest, process, we'll take notes, take minutes, and I want you to think about, you know, ways to kind of operationalize, and we will, you know, probably at our June meetings. Next month, we're meeting at the Indianapolis Children's Museum. They have an exhibit about Inside Out. That was a neat way to kind of tie in children's behavioral health aspect of it. As an aside, one of the new emotions in the movie is ennui, which I think would be interesting. But again, similar, you'll see current themes, workforce, you'll also see, you know, the idea of like, you know, treating the person and not just like one size fits all. So, we will take all the volume of information that we are process it, take notes, send it out. Any comments before we close?
The other thing that I'm just thinking about is a core part of my constituency right here in the middle of downtown are folks who are unhoused and who are self-medicating, folks who we see, as we talked about, you know, going through systems of incarceration or hospitalization. And as we talk about, you know, how can we spend our funds on preventative measures? I'm just thinking about that. It's something, you know, for us to continue, you know, no grand solutions, obviously. Because if we had a magic wand, we would have already solved the issue, but just thinking about how we leverage these different funding streams that we've talked about. How do we leverage the supports? How do we leverage our ability to expedite processes where we can and reduce barriers and hurdles and bureaucracy so that we can, you know, support some of our most vulnerable.
Jay, I just want to say thank you. I know when I spoke with you, when I was getting to know you a little bit better, this is the issue that I was most concerned about. So this information has been really great today, and I appreciate what you put together. Thank you.
Thank you to our presenters. This is like the expertise in this area. No, aging, but 150 years or so. Of expertise here, and so we're beneficiaries. So any final comments? All right, well, I will see you all in the month. Thank you.
I know. I'm a weird geek still.
Yeah.
Right?
That all the day off for that, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and then being in West Lafayette, my